Good morning. I'm going to start off this service a bit differently than I did the last one because looking back on it, in the last one I engaged in what I think is pastoral and ministerial malpractice. We are in a moment that will be remembered for generations. We stand now in a moment in which people look into the future fearful of what it may hold in ways that they did not on Thursday. We stand now at a time in which those of us who have been blessed with daughters in particular regret that our children will grow up in worlds more like our parents than worlds like ours. So I want to take a moment and I want to ask you to do something for me before we get into the preaching moment. I want you to close your eyes, if you would. Now I want you to take that feeling of fear and I want you to see a little box that's beside you in the pew. Just a little wooden box. And I want you to take the fear that you're feeling. I want you to take the hopelessness that you may be feeling. I want you to take whatever despair you may have, and just for a moment, just put it in the box beside you. I want you to allow your soul and your spirit, even if just for a moment, to know what it is to be opened unto God. The world will be here when we get back, and when we leave this place, the struggle will be here. But I want you to take this moment to just breathe. Take this moment to breathe in the face of a God who values all of God's children more than anything that is silver and gold. One who loves each and every one of us and only wants the best for us. So I want you to take all of the things that are weighing upon your heart, and I want you to put it in that little box beside you on the pew. There'll be time enough for you to take it up again when we leave this place. But for now, I want your spirit to be free. If you could do that for me, I would be so appreciative. I invite you to come back now into this space. Come back into the space with us and allow your spirit to fly free, even if only for a moment, knowing that God is embracing us in this moment and giving us courage and hope. I want to say what an honor it is to stand before you in the pulpit of this grand and historic congregation, which in your own words has been a liberal religion for more than a century. I would like to thank your pastor, Reverend Dr. Bozen, and the entire leadership team for their work in this part of the vineyard, their common work with you, and for the kind invitation to be with you this morning. I also want to give a special thanks to my dear friend and sister, your director of music, Dr. Jolie Rock. Her presence here speaks well of your commitment to excellence in this work to which we have all been called. And I just want to say how happy I am to be with you this morning, because it does my heart well to be in a space where people are trying to find the depths of the goodness of our humanity and the fullness of our humanity, and not trying to find a religion that allows them to lord it over someone else or that allows them to seek to diminish the humanity of others. So I give God a special thanks this morning that if I have to preach someplace on the Sunday after the fall of Rome, that it is in this place, among these people, because their hearts are ones that seek a better world than which we have. So I give God thanks for you and for this opportunity. Now, having heard our readings for the morning from James Baldwin and Audre Lorde, allow me then now to read our scripture for the morning, from which I will preach. So I invite you now to incline your ears to the word of truth. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now these words upon which this nation was founded are the sacred writ, the sacred text, the call which forms the raison d'etre, or reason for being, if you will, for the existence of this nation. America exists to recognize, to cultivate, and to uphold the flourishing of humanity by the treating as sacred the basic rights with which God, our Creator, has endowed us all. Now, there are many that would say that I, a black man, the descendants of slaves, and the child of a domestic, has no right to say what America ought to be. That I have no right to say what it is that America was founded to be. But I say that I have as much of a right as anyone else, as do you. The right to life. The right to live our lives and not be treated as the property of the state or anyone else. The right to our bodily integrity, which, whether it is a womb or another anatomical feature, is not dictated by law and by custom. We have a right to our own bodies. The right to the freedom of our person. A freedom which, short of predatory behavior, means that basic conduct of our lives, vis-a-vis our bodies, belongs to us and not to the state. This is the basic right of liberty. The right to the pursuit of happiness is quite simply the right to live, as time and circumstance allow, lives of our own choosing, unencumbered by the fiat of the state or any judicial system outside the bounds of the public good. Now, the state can ask us to behave in ways for the public good, but the state cannot say that our bodies have no integrity over which we have choice. Now, I choose this as a text from which to preach because we find ourselves as a nation in the midst of a crisis which may well decide the fate of life as we know it on this planet. Now, before saying more about that crisis in which we find ourselves, I want to talk a bit about the gravity of the moment in which we're living and in which this happens. There are two realities to which I draw your attention in particular. The first is that the ecosystem upon which we rely for our existence as a species hangs now in a balance. What happens over the next decades will decide whether our descendants have a planet that is hospitable to the form of life which we call human or not. And any of you who have watched any of the sci-fi movies which actually have a grain of truth know that our ecosystem, once it begins its collapse, it will happen swiftly. The outcome of the struggle against global warming will be decided by the policy decisions of a few nations in particular, and chief among them is the United States of America. So one of the things we have to disabuse ourselves of is that you can recycle all that you want. You cannot use paper all that you want. You can be responsible in terms of what kind of vehicle you drive all you want, but at the end of the day, it is only public policy that has the power to save the ecosystems upon which we rely for our lives. To the extent that our current political and cultural crisis paralyzes our policy interventions, we participate in the unraveling of the systems upon which we all rely for life. And that is the danger. Let's not state it improperly. The danger is when the government becomes paralyzed so that it cannot enact policy. We often think, oh, well, it's the other side that has bad policy. No, it's the paralysis so that there's no policy. Put plainly, what happens in America in this fight for our lives as a species will decide our fate as a species. Whether humanity long survives or simply becomes a premature relic of an epoch on this planet will be decided by the actions of this nation. So when we talk about what happens in this nation, the gravity of the moment is that this time in which we live, this time in this nation in which we live, will largely decide the fate of our entire species. Whether we survive the Anthropocene, as it is called, is an open question that is left for us to decide. The second reality to which we must be drawn is that at present, our nation is incapacitated in terms of policy formation to address the environmental crisis. So that's the problem, as I've said, the paralysis. Because of a particular sort of human fragility. There's a reason why we have the paralysis that we have. And what that is a particular sort of human fragility, very specifically white fragility. Because there would be no party that was against policy to address global warming were there not sufficient amounts of white grievance over having to share this planet and this nation with people that look like someone other than themselves. There would be no power in Congress that would block every move that we need to make to save our planet were it not for white resentment at having had a black president. There would be no question that we have a responsibility to our descendants that overrides any of our own provincial desires, were it not for people who have decided that if the future looks like Barack Obama, then they will live in the past and doom us all. We find ourselves fighting political battles many of us thought had long been won. That's the poignancy of the moment. As I was looking and I was seeing a young man that had his child, and he was walking with his child in his arms, I thought to myself, he's in the midst of a fight that is going to take the rest of his life to ensure that his child, to ensure that his daughter, his son, will have a life in a nation dedicated to freedom, a nation dedicated to hope. Now, I've been in the fight for about 35, 40 years now, and I can say I get weary, but I've been in the fight long enough so that I can get weary, but I'm going to get right back up and continue fighting tomorrow. What we have to do is encourage those who don't know that fight to not despair and to gain hope that they can make a better world for their children, that they can make a world filled with hope. Because we won these battles one time, we can win them again. This is a political and cultural fight over whether the ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness will extend to all of us, or whether or not they will be the exclusive domain of white, straight Christians. To the extent that we find ourselves in the prologue of our second Civil War, we as a nation are wholly incapable of making a contribution to the survival of our species in the face of the climate catastrophe in which we live. Now, this is the reality in which our nation's greatest crisis is unfolding. Now, I say our greatest crisis because the other crisis will become a foregone conclusion if we do not deal with this crisis. In the face of political and cultural dissolution, which threatens our very existence as not just a nation, but as a species, all that we have is an anemic, moribund civil religion. We have allowed a religion of the public square, which calls us all from our parochial valleys of certainty to the high plains of possibility to wither on the vine. We have not tended to the cultivation of a religious sensibility for ourselves and for our children that makes place and space for us all. Because that's what a good civil religion does. It makes place and space for us all. Because we have allowed American civil religion to become weakened, we find ourselves as a nation in the grip of a provincial expression of Christianity, which seeks everything but life more abundantly for us all. Now, some of you may not be able to say that because you may be talking about somebody else in the family, but this is my family. So I've been a Christian minister and theologian for more than 30 years. So I have permission to talk about when my cousins start doing wrong and when they are leading us to the path of destruction. Somehow we must find a way to break the grip of this provincial expression of Christianity if we are to survive. The challenge for us then is this: to renew and revivify an expression of humanity that is filled with possibility, that calls our citizenry beyond the confines of our confessional identity to a greater obligation to all humanity. Now, I'm not saying that people have to stop being what it is that God has called them to be, because I'm a true believer that you answer in the voice that God calls your name. I can't force anybody to be a Christian. I can't force anybody to be a Jew. I can't force anybody to be a Hindu. I can't force anybody to be a Muslim or any other expression of faith if that is what God called their name and how God called their name. So the challenge for us, and it is a challenge for which this congregation and this people is uniquely suited, is to call people from their parochial understanding of life, to call people from their parochial understanding of faith, to call people from their provincial ways of being into a religion that seeks not only the full flourishing of all God's children, but at the end of the day actually features a dedication to humanity having a future at all. Our challenge today, and the one which I leave with you, is that it falls to us, you and I, those who care about making the future one in which our children and their children's children will not only have a future, but will have a future that is worth having. That it is our obligation to give voice to a civic obligation of faith rooted in good faith and unyielding in dedication to saving our world for our descendants. We do this work knowing that no one religion is adequate to the task, but rather understanding that building a society with peace for us all requires us all. I leave you with these words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, knowing that upon these rights turns the fate of us all. Amen.